Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Thursday, May 22nd. We'll call to order at 6:37 p.m. Now I've got to snooze my Windows updates so they don't do it to me because that just popped up. First item of business, appoint local hazard mitigation planning committee members.
I was happy to see we have some interested candidates who bring some unique and valuable experience to offer to the committee. So, you have any input or?
I have no concerns. I agree. There's definitely some very interesting background and interest, and I see a PS about a cable committee, so that's interesting in there too.
Exactly.
Yes.
Actually, I've gotten a lot of
Excuse me.
inquiries about the cable committee, so that's fantastic.
Oh, good. Well, I guess your shout out about it on town meeting night helped.
All right.
So that's great. We don't have. We're waiting on one more name, right? I mean, to be done.
Correct. This will get you to 8 members.
Is that for the paper mill representative?
Correct.
We're still
And
waiting.
we're going to try to do one more outreach to the railroad,
Okay.
but we don't have the same relationship that we have with.
Fair.
So.
Okay.
Well,
go right ahead.
if we're ready, I will make a motion to appoint C. Mark Blatchley to the Local Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee with a term ending June 30, 2026.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I will make a motion to appoint Gerald Sykes III to the Local Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee with a term ending June 30th, 2026.
I will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Meeting minutes for April 28th and May 12th, 2025.
I have read both sets and have no concerns.
Okay. I wasn't present on the 28th. I have no problem voting on what's presented, but obviously that's what I know. So I guess I have no preference either way. If you want me to hold it to Scott's here, or go ahead with it. If you're comfortable with it, then I am comfortable with the context that I read.
Well, can we do them as an aggregate, or would you like?
Yeah, aggregate's fine.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of April 28th, 2025 and May 12th, 2025 as presented.
Will second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Review the surplus equipment request from the school department, second read.
We have shared the list of equipment with departments, and we're already starting to hear back from departments who are interested in viewing that equipment before we make it available publicly. So,
Excellent. So potentially what I would recommend then is that we wait to do a third read until we have adjusted for anything we're going to keep.
Yep.
And just update the counts on whatever sheets for
Okay.
anything that's going to stay, and so that at least the final one is the potentially reduced counts.
when I spoke to Principal Gannon, it looks like they have a couple things that they're in the middle of, and they're looking to unpack the items out of one of the storage Connex boxes at the end of May. So I think at the end of next week, beginning of June, so maybe we'll hold it to the June 9th meeting. Once it's out, then we'll be able to have department heads view it. So
Sounds good. And if we need more time, we'll just delay it till the next meeting.
okay.
Any other concerns or questions?
No, with that, I am content to carry it to a third read at a time that's appropriate.
Excellent. Review of the police cruiser procurement. Any questions on it?
I have no questions or concerns.
I think the only thing that, and I don't think we're concerned about doing it as a change after, is we may change what we're using for an MDT for the data terminals in the cruisers, at which point the mount may change or some small item like that, which is the upfitting at the end anyway, and shouldn't be a significant change. So that's
Yeah.
the only open item that I'm aware of, which I don't think needs to hold us up from.
No.
I know Chief's not concerned about it.
Okay. I will make a motion to award the procurement for the Ford Utility Police Interceptor to McGovern MHQ Inc. of Marlborough, Mass. 01752 in the amount of $67,209.80, and to authorize Brian Smith, Town Administrator, to execute all necessary agreements.
Excuse me. Do we need to make any note about after after July 1?
We're just gonna get the order in the queue.
Right.
We're not gonna
Knowing
see it
it's
till
not going to show up
October.
anyway, we don't need to put any clause in there, right?
It's your motion. So if that you think makes it cleaner, as long as you're okay with us at least filing the order.
I don't have any concerns it's going to show up sooner. If it did, we
That's
wouldn't,
our only
we wouldn't
concern.
obviously take it. So, I
Right.
mean, that would be the only thing.
Yep.
And that, as long as you guys communicate that clarity, that the funding won't be there till, for some reason, they have a cruiser on July 1, sure,
It will
but
not be till after July
not
1.
before that.
Correct.
Okay. Then I have no issues. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Review of the Patrol Officer Position Screening Committee composition and potential appointment. Come on up, Chief.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Evening, sir.
Selectman Loin, you're over there somewhere?
I am.
One of these days we'll get some permanent location for things and mount them, and then they won't be in the way, ever. So this is one I know we discussed a little bit when we talked about the cadet, but circling back to Patrol Officer Screening Committee, currently it's a 5-member screening committee. And Chief, you had expressed interest or want to be a member ex officio of that. I know there was some discussion, but no decision was made either way. And so we're bringing it back to have that discussion.
Okay. I believe I expressed my opinion when we did discuss it about the cadet. My opinion hasn't changed, but for the purpose of this meeting and the 10,000 people out there who maybe didn't hear that broadcast, I am strongly in favor of all department heads participating in the interview process. I know there's a nuance with police reform and post requirements for certain types of background checks that within our organization and framework, those responsibilities fall largely on Chief Holst, and allow him the opportunity to interact with candidates. But I think it's important, given that as our subject matter expert and the individual who is ultimately responsible for training, supervising, overseeing an officer's body of work, I think it's essential that he be part of the process, or any chief, meaning police chief moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I think the nuance or the difference versus other screening committees where we're hiring for a department, the department head is a voting member usually, is not just the background piece, but as I understand it, there's an interview step where you're interviewing those candidates after the screening committee's put them forward, doing the post process as well, and then before they come to the board. Is that correct?
Yeah, post provides me with a set of questions that the candidate has to answer to.
Okay.
And so and then post dictates what type of background has to be done, whether it's for their criminal history, we have to check the national database to see if they're a certified officer and all that. So the interview that we're conducting is what post says that we have to do. I'm not necessarily asking the candidate a new set of questions, other than just what Post has provided me with.
And I had a lot of different discussions about different groups and things over the last few months. Were you planning to participate ex officio or not in the interview process, or not in the as part of the screening committee?
Not the interviews themselves, no.
Okay. So, I think just kind of on what you said about being part of the interview process, having that second interview process, and being that, Chief isn't asking, at least at this point, to be ex officio to participate in the interview process. I'm a little unclear on where there's what the what is the upside, what is the gain versus the hiring process that we've gone through with the last officer, with the committee as it is, versus adding you if you're not doing those things. So I guess I'm not quite there yet.
I think for me, Chairman Smith, is that reviewing applications, seeing what we have for applications. The last process, I didn't see the applications. I didn't know the applications. During the last process, somebody was recommended by the hiring committee, and I don't think that they made a bad decision in what they chose, but ultimately, I didn't make that recommendation, and I think that we run into potentially down the road where they may say, yes, they want to submit somebody for recommendation. I say, no, we don't want to recommend them and then you guys are like, do we bring them before an interview with us? And then you're faced with, are we going to hire them? And then now we have the chief that said he doesn't want them for whatever reason. I think that we could maybe solve that problem in that process before we get them in an interview process. And then, so it's almost like we all agree that this candidate would be a good quality candidate to present. Then we go on to the interviews. They can always, report back, hey, this candidate was real strong in this area, this candidate was real weak in this area, and we can have those conversations to try to present the best quality candidate. And then, okay, you've been selected by the committee, the chief, thinks that you'd be a good fit. Now you have to complete this post requirement. They pass that post requirement, and now we're presenting 1, 2, 3 names to you folks to decide, and you rank them or whatever we've done in the past. Hopefully we have 3 or 4 to present.
Sure.
I think that's and just being more, this is what we had for candidates. I think that's where the benefit of having me there.
So, I guess, but raises other questions or concerns maybe around, if you're not a voting member, then what you're sharing sounds like influencing or changing or voting on who does or doesn't go forward. But this request was to be a non-voting member, which means you wouldn't have say in who gets recommended by the screening or should be interviewed or anything because you're non-voting. So it sounds inconsistent, right, for me.
But if I have,
So you'd be a subject matter. So maybe
if I have knowledge,
let me back up. You'd be a subject matter expert on policing as the chief, as an ex officio member. You were not a member that, at least in my understanding, what I would expect of an ex officio, does not vote or decide or recommend based on other knowledge about a candidate. It's subject matter expertise. It's not candidate expertise or decisions about candidates, because that's a voting member requirement. Maybe I think about it differently, so I'm curious of your thoughts.
Well,
and Brian, if you have an opinion just from a structure standpoint on what that is, but maybe I'm looking at it incorrectly.
I mean, we're currently using that same framework right now with a current department head sitting as an ex officio member providing input and feedback to the voting members of the selection committee.
On subject matter expertise or other? And, I mean, without,
I mean, at the end of the day, this is an important conversation that you're all having. The committee members make that decision as to what that involvement looks like in each one. To your point, yes, if you appoint as an ex officio and there's no vote, the other members who are voting members, they will make the final decisions, but the actual role and how things get done, that's made at a committee level through their own deliberations.
got it.
I mean, and I will say, please don't take this in as any way as a slight. When this framework was first recommended by you in the last go-around, I wasn't in favor of it. I was willing to go along with it. You expressed some reasons that, sure, that maybe they certainly had some merit and it was worth considering. I believe you said was, gone through a process, and I don't want to put quotes around it, but I think the essence was maybe we were missing something, and having a broader community input would help us find a particular kind of officer. And I thought it bared enough merit to at least consider it and try it as an experiment. And I think we were very fortunate to have the officer that we selected through that process. But going back to my gut, I'm still not in favor of that framework. And when I think about, again, this has that post requirement, which other department heads don't. But if I look at it globally and I think of other department heads across the organization, I can't imagine a school principal not having input on the hiring of a teacher. I can't imagine our fire chief in the selection process coming forward that he wouldn't be involved in the process. I can't imagine our librarian not being involved in the process.
I guess I don't see it as not involved, because at the end of the day, chief's going to come with the candidates after the post screening, and I don't know if we've discussed it, but I don't think there's anything that says that interview process that chief's doing with the candidates for post has to be limited to the post questions. He's doing an interview, so to me that can be whatever scope of interview you'd want it to be. And I don't think any board up here isn't hearing that feedback combined with the screening. I understand your point about there may be a different screening may have put someone forward, and maybe they will presume that, in the hypothetical, there's nothing in the post process that has excluded them from being moved forward. And maybe your take from going through that with them was not to recommend it. I think at the end of the day, the board, as the appointing authority, has to weigh those things and hold the interviews and then make a decision ultimately, right? And if anything, that, for me personally, would indicate that we need to go through those interviews and have those discussions with if we have a pool. I mean, first of all, having a pool would be great. So, right, because that's not normally, unfortunately, where we land. But having one, and then obviously having that opportunity to go through and hear from that candidate, and then weigh what we've heard from those two groups and what they've done to help inform what we decide. I don't see any big issue with it either way, but I don't see any reason to significantly change it either. It didn't seem like it was an issue with it working last time. I guess for me, that's where I stood. I thought, you had requested it. It was new and different, and post is new and different, and all of these things. I didn't come out of it thinking there was anything lacking by the process that we did, and I'm not. For me, I'm not hearing or seeing anything that I think is a significant reason to change it or not. For me, I'm hearing the opposite from you, which I respect.
Yeah, certainly.
So, I mean, I guess from there, you know, there's a couple things. You know, I don't want us to sit here and belabor it all night either, and I also don't want us to, you know, if we're going to potentially vote opposites, then there's a reason there's 3 members on this, and he's not here tonight, right? And when we put this on, I had forgotten that, so maybe it wasn't the right night to put it on. Because, you know, well, we've talked about this. I was not necessarily, I know it's no surprise to you that I didn't see a strong reason yet and wanted to have the conversation. So, I mean, I guess my recommendation would be to carry it to a future meeting, if that makes sense to both of you. I mean,
I can agree with you on that because I see an impasse and I'm
I do too. I don't
So-
necessarily think we're going to get to a consensus, and that's okay.
wait to
I,
our colleague.
So don't want to. That's why there's an odd number of us up here to have that discussion. And so,
All right.
I mean, I heard more tonight than I heard before, which was good. I appreciate that from both of you and the viewpoints. I'm not hearing enough that I'm going to say I want to make a change. I think it worked. So, and I think you're leaning the other way. So I feel like we'll just bring it back and.
And may I just say, you said you respected my opinion, and I equally respect yours. We're just on different sides of it right now.
Absolutely, and that's fair.
So I'm content to carry it to a future
Okay.
meeting when there's an odd number here to, and I will,
To tie break.
I will respect the decision that's made either way.
Same. All right.
Same.
Appreciate it. So we'll carry it to the next meeting. I think
June
Scott's
3rd or
the
whatever it
9th, is that
June
right?
2nd.
Oh, June 2nd.
June 2nd.
I'm sorry, thank you. Yes. I can't keep track of where the holiday lands this year for some reason, so yes, the 2nd. We'll carry it to
And if
that.
you're okay just making the plug, we are actively, the search is open now,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
and we're actively accepting applications. They're coming in, which is fantastic.
And the first part, we do have a hiring committee, right, made up
We do have a
already,
hiring
and that's
committee.
already
Correct.
established.
Yes.
So we're ready to start for June. That's the goal, is to get this up and running for June. Hopefully start the interview processes and work towards naming finalists to bring before the board this summer. We're obviously working towards finding a replacement for Officer Gordon prior to her retirement later this fall. So,
Right.
so we're trying to get this process in place so that we have plenty of time.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's open, it's a rolling
Yes.
deadline, but the
We're accepting
preferred.
now.
Yeah, we're accepting now.
Yep.
The initial deadline is,
We didn't, on this one, we didn't
We
give a
didn't set
firm
one?
deadline
okay.
because we have a
So
little,
it'll be
little
once
runway.
we kind of established and
Exactly.
set a time to start.
Correct.
So sometime
we're
in
eager to
June, as
start
you
in
said,
June.
soon, yeah, in
Correct.
June, so.
Yep.
And yes, we have the same 5-member that is the cadet without you as an ex officio.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's the same established.
Perfect.
Okay.
And thank
Alright.
you to all those that decided to do it again, so I do appreciate it. I know it's time consuming, so.
I mean,
It is
important part of our
appreciated.
community. I think everybody's cares and wants to.
Yep.
hopefully
All
have it.
right, we'll see you guys in a couple weeks or next week.
Thanks, Chief.
You're out tomorrow, so we'll talk Monday?
I'm around.
Okay, then we'll talk, yep.
All right, with that, it is 7:01 PM. I'll call the joint meeting to order with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee. Come on up. We'll just cover one stop here first,
Yeah, okay.
since we didn't even start it before 7, so we'll just do it now.
You nudge me if I do something wrong.
Do
I
you-
apologize, I don't know where the other 2 members are.
Okay,
I believe that they both said they would be here this evening, and I have not heard from them, so.
okay.
But we do have a quorum of capital.
We do. Okay, well, we'll start with the one-stop grant, and then it's just mostly kind of a quick review of it, if there's any input or questions. And this is focused towards the senior housing project is the, as we discussed, so this isn't new, but we're just actually getting ready to submit it. So if there's anything in there anyone saw or any questions about it, Jim, same. Please let us know.
So the one thing, if you don't mind, I just start off with, we are working with our engineers to just get revised quotes. The proposals that the Capital Planning Committee and FinCom and Select Board all saw at this point almost a year ago are a year out of where the market is. And so we are just updating and making sure that there's new contingencies and numbers that reflect the current market values. So if we're putting in the grant application, we don't want to be behind on where costs may end. So I offer that we've gotten some of that new information in here. We have one more engineer to hear back from. So between this review and your review on June 2nd, there may be just a slight change to that budgetary number as it's informed by that update.
Okay. Was there any open, other than that, any open items on here, or question mark items? I didn't notice any.
No, I think
More kind of filled in and informed by what we're trying to do.
exactly. Glenn's doing his best. He's been here with us 6 weeks. He's gotten up to speed with the project. He's been meeting with the Senior Housing Committee. He's been meeting with our team at RDI. So he has a pretty good lay of the land and what we're working to achieve. He's been meeting with the highway superintendent and going through all the files. And so I think he's done a decent job of trying to take everything he's learned, put it into this application, and now he's soliciting feedback from all the different constituents. So Senior Housing is going to be reviewing it again. They already had one review. They're going to be reviewing it again this week, or actually next week, excuse me. Has been reaching out to our legislative delegation and their support teams, RDI, and other stakeholders in the county to get their feedback. So this draft is informed by those conversations, and this review will further inform any revisions.
Okay. When is it due? Did I
It's
miss
due
that?
on June 4th. So
Okay.
my hope is on June 2nd, if you all are comfortable with it, you give us the green light. On June 3rd, we can
Third
begin
we'll
that
submit.
submission.
Okay.
What's the time frame to hear back on that, Brian?
They don't give you a firm, but from our past experience, because we've applied, I think, in 2 other rounds, we typically hear around October.
Okay.
Did you see anything in there, Jim? Any questions
No,
on the
there's-
other items?
So I read through this morning, and there was nothing that was glaring or jumped out at me. No red flags throwing up. I'm just scanning through, but I guess my short answer is no, there's nothing that's
Oh, glaringly obvious.
bringing concern right now.
Okay.
One thing just to add, I know we had this conversation at the Senior Housing Committee meeting. You'll see a lot of the questions have character limits. So you're doing your best to fit in as many important words and phrases and all the things that we've been trying to articulate for years into those character restricted fields. But there is an attachment section that is open-ended. So Senior Housing knows that there's also an opportunity if there's certain information that we feel is really important for the review team to hear about our project, and it's not going to fit in one of these predefined limited fields, we can create a supplement and attach it in that section. So if you're reviewing this and feel like we didn't give enough, but we're up against a character limit, Glenn's flagging that information and we'll create an addenda to add.
Okay. I feel like I know some places that put in character limits in their narratives. And 536A, the one that I had noted was that the very first item has a May date on it this year. So by the time we're submitting, that should have passed. So I would either, I don't know if that's going to get marked submitted like the April one is, like the 5th or 6th bullet down.
You said 5.36?
36A.
Scrolling and scrolling.
Oh, in our packet 67.
There we are.
Thank you.
Are you referring to the very
Page
first,
26 of the one-stop.
the very first bullet?
Yes.
Okay.
A 36A, the first bullet, EOHLC.
So that is the eligibility letter that you responded to. Remember it?
So it's been submitted then, or complete, so we should mark it as such instead of it like, that reads like it will be, because it says what's
it.
outstanding. That is, we've at least responded, so
Yep.
whether that's like the Mass Historic PNF where it says it's been submitted.
Right. Okay.
At least put something like that in there, because by then, well, A, sounds like we already did.
Yep.
And B, just to kind of note that it's not past due. Don't want it
Correct.
to look like we didn't get something done yet.
Good catch.
Say, I missed that.
Well, I mean, maybe
No,
it's my perspective and it
No,
doesn't
it's
look
a-
past due, but to me,
It's a
it's
good point. Thank you
looked
for the
like it would be.
clarification.
anything that anyone else had questions or comments on it? Okay. We'll bring it back on the 2nd and hope to be approving and finalizing and submitting on the 3rd.
Okay. If in the meantime anybody does have feedback, you can send it to Glenn and myself, or if anybody wants to set up a meeting, happy to do that.
Okay. And then review of the special town meeting warrant draft. Understand you don't have a quorum. We'll be bringing it back to finalize on the 2nd probably. So we can, if there's any questions or comments or more information, please speak up so we can get it, and then we'll have time to vote on it at that point.
Okay.
So the board talked about this a little bit in our last meeting and came up with some things that were outstanding, some things that we said we'd pull forward, et cetera. And there's also a couple of considerations, and so maybe talking about those first. The borrowing authority for Church Street Bridge, which we have already been given by the voters. The many hours and years now, right, of work to get this state and federally funded instead of having to borrow and have the taxpayers pay for it has been great, except slow. However, we do have outstanding costs that we've been carrying to get there this year, which is approximately $300,000.
Correct.
So there's a question on what do we do about that? Do we borrow for the 300, which is a really small amount of money, and there's some info about what borrowing would cost here, which is not going to be cheap for a small amount of money. Or do we potentially consider this as a capital stabilization funded? So we could take, and put it on as an article, fund it from there. Or maybe there is the Arch Street project that we did a few years ago for wastewater, which was a borrowing authority. We had to borrow the full amount, even though our expenses didn't end up coming up to the full amount. We can't return the money. We can't pay off the loan early. So the money just sits there in an account. About $140,000.
I thought it was 107, but it's just
107.
over 100.
Okay. It's over 100,000. So that money sits there right now and isn't doing anything for us except we're paying interest on it because we borrowed it, and we can't pay the loan off. We can't pay it towards the loan early. We can't prepay for 7 years, I think.
Yeah, it was
So,
year 8.
because there's a 7-year clause on prepayment. There's no prepayment for 7 years or early payment. It was all part of that borrowing, but so the funding sits there unused, and we borrowed it, and we might as well use it. So after reviewing it with the town accountant, the guidance that we have is that it can be used for any capital project. It doesn't have to be a wastewater project without a further vote of the taxpayers, because the taxpayers voted to use it towards a capital project. So if we wanted to spend it towards any other capital project.
It does need to be voted on. It's available to the voters for appropriation
Okay.
for a capital project.
Okay. I
Sorry.
misspoke.
So
So we
that
do
wasn't
need to,
clear.
we would use that as part of the funding source
That
to
would be an
reappropriate
option.
it to that.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
That would
I
be the vote,
misunderstood.
yes. Yep.
Thank you. The clarity was it doesn't have to be a wastewater project. It could
Correct.
be any capital project. So one possibility is to fund some of the 300 or a third of it roughly from that with a transfer article and then fund the balance from capital stabilization, avoiding any borrowing. And at this point, that amount should cover anything that we anticipate outstanding or to come before it's being funded by state and federal appropriation.
So the only other thing that, this was back when Selectman Bembury was on the board, that we had this conversation. We actually had a STM scheduled where you were going to take an article back and ask to rescind the borrowing authority because we had been accepted then. And I think it actually was Selectman Bembury who said, I think we should keep it just in
Till.
case the bids come in higher than anticipated and we didn't want to be in a situation where the state couldn't proceed if the town had to contribute. So I think, yes, I don't anticipate anymore, but I think we were keeping the authority open just in case something happened when the bidding happens this summer.
But in terms of expenses up until we have
Right, it's just these engineering
we have
costs.
bids back and hopefully expect that they will be covered by the funding from others.
Correct.
These are the only outstanding expenses that we need to
At this
cover in
time.
this fiscal year
Correct.
that we know of, or our free cash will be encumbered or something. So we need to take some action before June 30 or by June 30. I think to your point, I wouldn't recommend that we rescind the borrowing authority yet either until we've actually, have a contract awarded and it's in progress, or maybe until the project's done, just to make sure that we have whatever means we need to get it done. But this gets us through what is outstanding expenses in this fiscal year that we have to fund somehow.
Right.
So I guess that's the open question. So I'll look to capital first, just to kind of like what.
What's the open question is whether or not we are in agreement with your suggestion of taking the 100,000 from the Arch Street and 200,000 from capital stabilization?
Or you recommend borrowing it? That's the question.
No, I like that first solution. I don't know.
Fine with me.
Can I have one of these that has both my boards on it?
Sure.
Do you want to flip
So-
it, or you want it side by
Speaking
side?
as a capital planning member,
Oh.
I would agree. I think using the 100,000 from the Arch Street project and then the 200 from capital makes the most sense.
Okay.
I also agree. I agreed with it. I believe back then with now future Selectman Bembury's suggestion of not rescinding the borrowing authority until we are well
yes,
into the
yeah.
project and know we aren't going to need it
Yeah.
at all.
We want the
So-
bridge done.
Yes.
All, I think
Yeah.
everyone, voters
Yeah.
and everyone, and if we can do it for their money, great.
Right.
But we want it done. Okay.
So I'm going to make a revision to this article that sources first from the remaining Arch Street project and then second from capital stabilization.
That is the recommendation, yes? Yes.
We are all in agreement on this one.
Yep.
Mm. Nice
Thomas is-
solution, by the way.
Very quiet.
I can't talk.
Well, he's finance. I mean, you
No.
can, if you have questions, but no, you can't really weigh in on it right now to recommend or not.
Correct.
I would also just say we kind of review and think about the article language to be clear that, and maybe we just say something about like the borrowing authority is still open. We're doing this to avoid borrowing now. We hope to have the project fully funded, but are leaving the borrowing open because it says we're going to avoid borrowing. We don't know for sure we're going to avoid borrowing.
Fair.
We hope to avoid borrowing in the future, but
Yeah.
maybe we don't talk to the future part of borrowing. Just we're not going to borrow today, and we hope the state's going to pay for the balance. If that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense.
Avoid borrowing at this time.
Exactly. There you go. Like it. Do you know what that puts us, or where we are in capital stabilization balance, and where it does to us after town meeting? I mean, that's kind of town meeting was almost a wash, right?
Town meeting
It
was
was-
pretty much a wash.
It was
Yeah.
almost even. I
Yeah.
think the difference was $20,000.
Yeah, and we had mill in there.
It was
Mill
1.2
two.
something. And obviously we don't know what the ending market value will be by June 30. So
Okay. Well, let's hope it's still a mill.
we've been operating off of the June 30 balances as
Last
opposed to any gains or losses that we've had this fiscal year. So
So that's item one. That was a call out, and then the Care Drive water extension planning.
yes, that was a new one.
That was a new one.
Sorry. So hopefully the memo explained what's going on. I think this was back in September of last year. The office from Representative Whips had reached out to us to inform us that all the engagement that she's had on the project led them to request an earmark on behalf of Erving in the housing bond bill that was being signed into law. So when the law was finalized, we were informed that it was successful, that the earmark was called out in the legislation, and to be in touch with ANF to discuss next steps in accessing the funding. So we were led to believe that this was largely available to us. We have been working since the beginning of January to try to understand how to access that funding, and through that process have come to learn that just because the earmark is included into the bond bill does not actually mean that the funding exists. That all has to happen through a capital planning process, which should be underway now. So we've been then instead trying to understand, how do you advocate? Because you're in competition with everybody else who has an earmark in there. After months of trying, I finally gotten at least an acknowledgement from ANF that our advocacy has been received. And there's many projects and they can't all be funded, but a decision will be made later this year. So I've taken that disappointing news, and this has included, we've reached out to the governor's office, we've been in touch with the senator's office. Everybody is aware that we are advocating for this funding. It may come through, but at this point it's not available to us. And in the meantime, we haven't been able to proceed. The board actually authorized us to proceed on the sewer engineering months ago. Ty and Bond is hesitant to do so because there's an economy of scale to doing both utilities at the same time. And so we have been hesitant to move forward on this project because of that. So the Senior Housing Committee at their last meeting discussed the matter and voted to ask me to forward a request to you all to consider an article that would allow $100,000 for the water engineering so that they could proceed. So that's the genesis of this request.
We'll hear later this year is the fall. Supposedly.
My understanding is the capital improvement plan is for the state's 26 budget, and the state's fiscal year is October 1 through September 30. So I don't know if we will in fact hear by the fall. I assume we would, but I don't know.
In theory, by October 1, it should be set.
In theory. If we wait to see if we're successful with the one-stop, which is currently where we were planning to source that funding, we're not going to hear until potentially the end of October, beginning of November anyhow. So in both cases, we end up in the same spot, or in a very similar spot.
Interesting.
And with as usual with all of these, if we expend, we don't get it back.
It's not a reimbursement situation. So,
But if we
Correct.
allocate 100 and spend 50, and then get awarded one or both, we're
Stop
out
spending.
50.
you're out 50. You don't have to spend the rest of
No,
the,
but
correct.
but we don't.
That's correct.
We're not just getting ahead of the money we might get. We're using our own money instead.
That's correct. And to that point, I did get the updated engineering proposal from Ty and Bond. So let me just double check how much that was. So So actually, the revised engineering estimates, and it's all broken out into the stages like you've asked in the past. Preliminary design was 17,050. Final design was 13,650. Permitting was 1,425.
For what?
All the way through construction, all of those steps and the additional steps to get through construction administration. The total engineering cost is just shy of $69,000.
For water.
Water alone.
But I only heard 30. Or
For
40.
those first 3 steps, you were
One.
at 32, just shy of 32.
And how much did we authorize in our last?
You previously had, there's $149,000 appropriated for sewer expansion onto Care Drive. And so my recollection is that you had approved us to proceed with the first 3 steps to get ready for the bidding phase.
How much was that?
So the revised costs, preliminary for sewer was 51,150. Final design was 40,950. So between the two, you're just at 92.
Can we just ask the voters to adjust that appropriation to cover both? Because if we appropriate 150, you didn't give me 150 between those first stages of both combined.
That's another ask. Yeah.
Then we're not pulling money now. We're not allocating even more money now that we may not hopefully need to spend.
So the question would be to take the existing appropriation and ask the voters to modify its accepted use to include water.
Right. To be both. We're building out both. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that it really matters that we're separating the funding in the capital investment stage. We get it if it's in a stabilization somewhere, but once we're investing it to build out the infrastructure is going to be built out.
No,
Probably not side by side across the street from each other.
The only reason that we had the engineers break it out by utility was because we were sourcing in the enterprise funds and we were trying to keep those costs separate.
Right.
But
But once it's
now-
been allocated, now it's out of that enterprise fund. It's in a capital fund.
No, this one
technically.
lives in the enterprise fund. So we
The
could,
sewer one does?
yeah, but
Okay.
we could vote to move it if the voters approved it. I had not contemplated that.
I mean, I don't know. I
It
don't
would
think
make
I'm
use
going to
of
have an
the-
answer. I'm not going to have an opinion, not an answer. I don't think I'm going to have a solid opinion tonight. I'm just like throwing out ideas and see where everybody thinks we should go. But I need to, personally, I just need to think about it a little more.
It would maximize the use of that existing funding.
I mean, we're talking about moving in these articles of stabilization, money into stabilization for water and wastewater. So, I mean, there's money there too.
Yep.
But I don't know.
Don't look this way.
I think it's another good idea.
I'm gonna
That's
look at
2
you
of
with
them
your
so far.
other, with your other title. You saying I'm 2 for 2 tonight? Wow, it's a
Oh,
record.
that might be.
I mean, we can think about it more and finalize it on the second. We don't have to decide tonight, obviously. So,
Would you like to
are
see?
there other ideas? So we want to fund it from stabilization, from water stabilization, not fund it and wait and see what we do. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to keep the momentum going, and this project is now approaching its 3rd decade.
Mhm.
I'd like to get it done, and if this is a way we can move the needle forward and still keep the opportunity open that that earmark will become available and
Mhm.
we won't lose out on potential funding that we've already spent. We've got this here, we just reword what we're asking for and amend that previous authorization.
Mhm.
Or we authorize 32 from water or from capital. I mean, it's probably 601
Yeah, it's
to some degree, but
a little outside the box thinking, but it allows us to maximize our opportunities and not sit and wait until October to find out where we are.
Yeah.
I think that was part of the, and obviously Bill can speak to his thoughts on this matter better maybe than me, but I think we were having this conversation around what would we do this summer. We're going to put in our applications in June, and then we will potentially just be waiting to hear. RDI will be working on their applications for October, so whatever they need for support from us. But is there anything else proactive that we can be doing in the meantime to get ready? And the potential that just because we apply, we're competing, we may not get it the first time. Is there another opportunity? So I think the thought was if we could be farther along with some of the engineering, refined costs, all of these right now are based on concepts. We don't actually have all of the refined information yet. If we could be plugging away at that, that may actually help us be a little more competitive if we had to apply a second time or look for a different source.
It reminds me similar to what the library did, where we tried to have like our matching grant, our match money put aside, and anything we could do to put our best foot forward in the competitive grant process we did ahead of time, so.
And
Just
I
my-
agree with Select Board Member Lloyd that we need to keep the momentum going. I mean, it started now.
Don't want to stall now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I guess my only other comment was going to be if everything's kind of application time and seeing what funding's available and et cetera, is there any gain by starting now in this? That's going to be my only other question. Like, is there any value other than we spent the money in doing the engineering now? If it doesn't delay anything, if we started it in October, we started it in January, we started it in March, you know, then I would be maybe hesitant to want to spend money early just to spend money. If it doesn't gain us anything. I get the momentum, but if it's then just a lull while we wait after the momentum, what did we gain except spending money?
You can never quite anticipate what the review, however the review process is going to go and what they're looking for when they're competing applications, what moves that needle, right?
Right.
My understanding from my conversations with Glenn and the research he's done on this, that there doesn't necessarily need to be a specific match listed, but anything that the locality has done to move that forward should be discussed, should be itemized to the best of our ability. So the 149,000 that we're talking about is already being listed in the application as something that has been a local contribution that's ready to move towards the project. I think if we can broaden its use and actually say we're actualizing it now, the update to the application that we would be putting in there is that the town plans to bring to town meeting on June 25th this request to broaden its use so that we can potentially proceed sooner with this engineering phase. Again, is that going to be enough to move a grant reviewer? It may. We
Or
don't
expand
necessarily-
it to cover water as well, so it's all of
Yeah.
it at
Right.
once, or,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. At the end of the day, they're both stabilization fund, I mean, they're both enterprise funds, they
Mhm.
both have money in them, that we're talking about moving to stabilization to fund capital projects.
Mhm.
I don't know if it makes a big difference which one we use.
Right.
In the stage where we have money in both that could cover it, that's,
Right.
at some point it may matter, we may not have enough somewhere and we need to use it, but.
Would you like to
So-
see a draft article?
What do you want to put in for a draft, and we can always change it, but do you want to see it, use the one, repurpose the 149 to cover both, or?
Yes. I think
Okay.
that makes the most
Yeah.
sense.
Let's do that.
Okay, I'll draft it.
That was your two open ones.
That was it. Stop.
Yay.
I promise to stop adding things.
And then the actual draft, any comment or question on any of the articles in the draft? Farley Bridge. We didn't talk about this one with capital. And bridges. There's a lot of question marks still here from what I understand from Wendell and what I've seen and back and forth, but they had engineering work. We went in together on, was it One Stop?
It was a one-step application.
On the One Stop with a joint, kind of project interest that Wendell took the lead on the application for, and got awarded, went through this, had probable cost that was within the funding available, and the bids came back extremely high in comparison,
Approximately $200,000 over their estimates in the budget.
which is like double plus, right?
Right.
What was funded. So that's where it's at right now. There's some question marks about what can we do, how do we proceed, et cetera. I think Wendell's in discussion with the state about this,
That's happened.
from what I was following.
Yeah.
So they're discussing with them about the situation and like what else might be able to be done. So we don't know yet if there's more funding that might be able to be allocated, right?
We do.
Oh, that's been done, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Would you like me to get that?
please, because
And I-
yes, because I don't have
With
it.
the caveat that I'm don't represent Wendell and I'm not trying to speak for them, but my
Sure.
understanding of the communications, they have reached out. There's no way to amend the award in its current state.
Okay.
The only option would be to reapply through the one-step process. I do believe that it was the road commission's intention to consider a new application, which would also be due June 4th, to seek the full amount of money, the approximate $350,000 that they need. In my conversations with the chair of the road commission, I reminded them that if we apply in June, we won't hear until October, November. The construction season for bridges will be over. We will likely be bidding this winter, and then construction season would be next year. So the prices that we're going to be looking at are a year from now. And I don't know if it will still be $350. In the meantime, I let them know that we were having this conversation, which they were very appreciative of. It doesn't sound like their local finances would allow them to do a similar article on their town meeting warrant in the short term. The most recent update I received from them is that, and I believe that they're accurate about this could be a Chapter 90 eligible project. And so I believe they were going to go back and speak to District 2 about potentially exploring how much of their Chapter 90, and I have no clue what their Chapter 90 allotment is,
Sure.
could be put towards this. So they're investigating that part. I know they have town meeting coming up in a week, so that's their focal point right now. I'll just let them know in the meantime, we were going to be working on trying to secure our half of the money, and if it's necessary, we'll be ready to respond. I think we're also going to offer if we can play more of a role administratively in supporting the stage. Wendell's done a great job of getting us to this point, but if they need some help getting it through the bidding process and getting it to construction, I think we can offer a little more support. They've really taken the lead on this, but we'd hate to see this project stall out.
Do we have Chapter 90 that's unallocated?
Yeah, we could look at our Chapter 90. We haven't received, I don't believe we received our fair share yet, so I could take a look at what's coming.
That's just a funny way to say it. I know that's what it's called, but
Yeah.
we should get more. We didn't get our fair share. No, oh, sorry.
Comes from the law.
Got
so
my, I know. Just had. So the other thing is, we also the bid has failed at this point due to
did
insufficient
get confirmation
funding.
they
That
failed.
was confirmed,
So
right?
we have to start the bidding process over again.
So I don't know. Go ahead. You sound like you were. Looked like you might have had comments or questions.
No, a comment was, in one of our last discussions, I asked the question, and I framed it in a way, what if we just didn't repair it and we shut it down? I will say that members of our community have expressed that they did not agree with my opinion on that. And
Understood.
so, hearing that, I will say that, not that, I needed to make it clear that was not my preferred option,
Understood.
but
All options are out there.
it was not my preferred option, but there was more than a couple of people that told me they would strongly advocate for that bridge to be repaired and remain functional and available to our communities.
Add me to your list.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on your list,
sure.
Deb.
I can say I've also heard from Wendell residents the same, similar and same.
Yeah,
So
no,
I think
and
it's
again,
true on both
I
sides.
want to be
for
clear.
sure.
It wasn't my preferred. It was just
No,
something that
it's-
we wanted
it's
to
an option.
ask and
Of course.
consider. Worst case scenario, but it was enough to motivate people to become interested and involved, which
Mhm.
I appreciate.
It's good to hear their feedback. At least we know what direction.
Yes.
Some people would like.
Yes.
So, other comments, thoughts, questions?
Just speaking as a capital member, my only question would be is if I'm following everything properly, it sounds like one of the options would be to go ahead and reapply and see if we are successful again. So is this 125 going to be enough, do we think, going through that process again? Or should we actually wait until that process has been done so that we can make sure that what we're asking our residents for is the correct amount, and we're not going back and, time and time.
So the question, it's a great question, and the question is dependent on what Wendell can or chooses to do, right? My understanding of the current grant round, you have a 18-month period to spend it. So I believe the existing award of approximately $150,000 can extend into at least through the fall. And if we're already under contract and working on things, I believe they'll work with us. We weren't the direct recipient, so I don't have all the grant documents in front of me. But if we can award our portion, at least 100, and I did suggest 125, so we had some contingency in case something unknown happens while they're working on the bridge and we need to respond. If Wendell's able to identify a similar funding source, whether it's Chapter 90 or some other approach they use, between the three sources, I think we have enough, and we could proceed. There were two submissions that I wasn't at the bid opening, but from my understanding of what they reported back, they were both responsive and responsible vendors. The prices were very similar, so they were both in the mid 300s. So it sounds like this price now is something we can plan for and rely on.
Okay.
If they were to reapply, the question is, does Wendell have the capacity to reapply? They may. They also may not. Things have changed in the last year, it sounds like. So there was also an internal question. If we're already working on one-stop application, there's no limit on how many we can put in. Would the town want us to be putting one in jointly and supporting our friends in Wendell? And so Glenn and I were all having that conversation today about whether or not that's another path. Glenn Johnson Masad was trying to reach out to Wendell to try to better understand where they are in this Chapter 90 review, to better understand if that's truly a path that we can anticipate, or if that's no longer being explored and we're back to the grant application.
And the rural development award was around 156,000 or so.
Yeah.
And so we have about, I call it a 200 plus shortfall, right? So the 125 gives us a little cushion if both sides.
Right.
I think they actually, Wendell's kind of like 250 of additional gives us that cushion, right? A little
Right.
bit of cushion around that.
So both towns can do the 125.
Right. I know we weren't the primary town on the original grant application. I know the rural development is still in play right now, at least for some period of time. If we reapply, do we lose that? If we don't get awarded in the reapply, like, so if we reapply, do we lose the 156 regardless of the decision?
That
Because
under the
are
scenario
we betting 156 on the
under the scenario that Wendell was going to reapply for the higher amount, the way it was worded to me is it was with the assumption that they were foregoing the current award. So yes, it would be returned.
Do you have to forego the current award before you apply?
I
I
don't
Second
get the
time?
answer.
I don't believe so. Well, there's the requirement piece, and then there's the how does that look to the grant reviewers, right? So I think the first thing I would say is you can apply every year, and you can have a project that spans more than one construction year. So from that standpoint, I don't think there's any prohibition on applying while you have an active award, as long as you have the ability to run more than one project at the same time. With that being said, I don't know how, again, with competitive grants, how a grant reviewer would look at that. We have been encouraged by our legislative delegation and the Economic Development Office at the state to consider reapplying. So I don't think they would encourage Wendell or us to apply if they thought it was a low chance.
Right.
But again,
Fair.
these are competitive funds, so I don't know how it will be received.
And if we in theory, if there was a reapplication, they could award the same amount again. They don't have to award enough. They could award the same amount again and say that's as much as we can give you, right?
It's kind of the beauty of the one-stop. You can put in,
Okay, just
yeah, you can
to
put in what
understand
you're
it.
hoping for and your justification for what you need, and they can fund the whole project, or they may come back and say we can fund a part of the project.
So I'm just thinking from the, we appreciate we got this. We're looking at ways to try to come up with a difference, but we also want to ask you if you can help.
Right.
But knowing that we're also trying to do it, we don't want to lose the 156, or we hope you would at least re-award it if we can't keep that award until we get an answer, you know, like whatever that is, right? That kind of that question.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of, or at least, I don't know, what was everybody else thinking about, like, where,
A lot of unknowns, but
yeah.
it sounds like either we or they should apply. Wouldn't Glenn have been the person who submitted it the last time, or?
Every town's structured differently.
Okay.
But the open, so I tend to lean the same way. I mean, I think hopefully the risk is low of reapplying, at least getting the same, as long as we're clear and communicating. Whether that's a discussion about, are we leading that this time? If they're not in a position to reapply and lead it again. So that's a question mark that we need an answer for. Are they able to? Are we able to? It's 2 weeks away.
The last email I saw, not that was directed to me, it was directed to somebody else. I was just copied on it. Made it look like they were leaning away from reapplying.
Okay.
So I don't know what that means for their capacity. What's behind that?
Sure.
And if
I was hoping that meant that they were leaning more towards the Chapter 90 approach.
Funding
If we were
it.
leaning towards this approach. But again, we weren't able, we put several calls in today and we weren't able to reach somebody and get a confirmation.
what's the current condition of the bridge in terms of usability and safety?
It's in a very similar condition that it has been since we noted the issues. And I'm not qualified to determine how long that safety lasts. I think as we've experienced in all our other bridge projects, that this will not get cheaper, quicker, better without intervention. And again, I think
Self-healing?
right, it will not self-heal. As you noted, the residents feel strongly, the ones who've spoken out about it, on both sides of the river. And with appreciation to our friends in Wendell, they really have carried it to this point. We were not in a place to carry it last year.
Right.
And I don't want to overpromise what our capacity is right now. We're dealing through our own backlog. But if they've gotten it to bid documents and it's ready for that, it may be something that we can help pick up and take it over the finish line with them.
For June.
If you want us to go the
Fourth or
grant
second,
route, we need
whatever.
to start now.
That's my that's a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Right.
You think we may be able to for that date?
I mean, again, using the documents that exist now, if Wendell doesn't, I mean, they're in the public sphere anyhow, so if Wendell doesn't mind us taking the lead on that,
Good.
yes, we could do it.
I mean,
They would
unless
have
they
to
were
provide-
opposed to applying again, I think it's been collaborative for a reason. Right?
Agreed. No, it's been all very, very cooperative.
Absolutely.
I think that then raises this question, similar to the conversation that we just had about the one-stop application that we were doing for Care Drive. Are we putting this in, saying that we're taking to town meeting a request for funding, or are we foregoing this, putting all of our expectations hopefully in the successful grant application?
Can we do both?
You all can do whatever you want.
You mean can we say we're bringing money? We're asking for money and we're asking for the grant at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yep,
Yeah.
Will that reduce the amount they award us for the grant?
maybe.
I don't know. You know.
They want to see finished projects. They don't want to see things half done or awards not used, because that doesn't help anybody. But it could result in, if they go, well, if Erving's been able to appropriate something and we've got only so much
Sure.
money to divvy up for these projects, they could reduce it.
Sure. I don't know. I'm kind of like a couple different things. I think we need to have that conversation with Wendell. Right? There's a couple questions out there for Wendell.
Okay.
Are they looking at pursuing? And you already have most of them, right?
Yep.
Are they actively looking at Chapter 90? Do they think that's an avenue that, with their financial situation, is going to fund the difference
Mhm.
of 125?
Okay.
If we're splitting it, right? Because I think if it's not 125, then it may be a part of it, but it's not the answer.
Right.
To getting it there. So even just understanding that, right? Do they think they have 125 from
Right.
there as a possible viable solution? And if so, is that a special in July, August, September?
If
If
it's
they
chapter
wanna-
90, I don't understand how a road commission works in Wendell, but if it's up to the road commission, to me, they call a meeting and they vote what they're applying their chapter 90 money towards, and that's a file with District 2. It wouldn't necessarily require a town meeting. It was a
And for
different
us, allocating chapter 90?
budget. You work on allocating chapter 90 with the highway superintendent all the
Right.
time. So the select board and everything.
So that's my other question is what's our chapter 90? Because
Okay.
we could be doing the same. And maybe it's not an article,
Okay.
right? It could be instead language is in the grant that says we're looking at our chapter 90 balances to see how much we might be able to award to help offset the deficit.
Okay.
Maybe not putting a number on it or not kind of committing a voted number. It gives a little more flexibility.
Okay.
And we have more flexibility in doing that whenever. Also about reapplying. How's Wendell feel about it? I think from what I read, I presume they may not have the capacity right now to be ready for the deadline. Do we first? Do we? And if we do, talk to Wendell about, does that work
You okay with us doing
collaboratively
that?
for us? I mean, Jim?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, let's figure out what some of the unknowns are if we can.
Yeah.
You know, I know we've talked about utilizing chapter 90 for some other initiatives that we have coming up in front of us, and I don't know, again, without
We
knowing
need-
what the balance is, where are we?
And we need to understand if that balance is earmarked or at least,
Earmarked or guaranteed?
yeah. If our 90 funds have an internal highway
Yeah.
superintendent
Sure.
earmarked to do X, Y, Z and the plan's coming up,
Yeah.
what does that mean if we
Yes.
do this? Or is there enough for this too? Right? Those questions.
I'll get that.
So that's our internal chapter 90 piece. The grant piece, their chapter 90 piece. And then I think then we can come back on second and decide if any or all of those variables put together means that we don't think going forward with this ask is necessary or timely, right? I mean, I don't know. It may be months out. We may not need to make that decision now. Maybe it helps with the grant app, maybe it doesn't. But any other questions or items for clarity that we should put out there?
Other than, can we get some answers and bring it back for further discussion on the second? And the decision might be a little clearer by then, or at least a direction to move.
Right. And I hate to, I don't know what Capital thinks about, yes, we want to do it or not, or we think we want to recommend it, but I also be hesitant to tie up the money if we don't know that Wendell's in a position to also tie up money to do it and move it forward soon. Even if we have to go back out to bid, that's a short process. If we don't know if they're versus getting money that we don't have a source for. So if there's not a source to find and they're still sorting that out, then tying up 125 of our money to sit there and wait for an unknown period of time is not necessarily helpful,
Agreed.
I think.
I think we
Okay.
just need to keep in mind, and we've never worked on a wooden bridge like this. I think the construction season over a river is going to be a little bit more complex than maybe one of the other bridges that we're working on that's going to be paved in concrete. 6 weeks for bidding on the shortest timeline. Calling a town meeting takes weeks, month really, if we're putting this together. So as you're planning those things out, waiting to hear on grants, as we put these timelines together, you start getting to years, right? Even if we start doing this, we're talking next summer that we're doing this, when the anticipation was doing it this summer. So I just want to be frank with people, if as we put these things together, we push things out. I don't want to give the false expectation to the residents that something couldn't change with the status of the bridge and we may have to put something that blockades people from using it while we're waiting for these things to work
Yeah.
through, right? There's a reality to all of that.
Well, I think the other one's the timeline, but I think the reality of the apply for the grant is that's a next year project then.
Absolutely is a
If
next
we
year
commit
project.
to doing that and wait for the answer, it's a
Right.
next year project.
Correct.
If,
That's
and
if it's
again,
funded.
not speaking for one, right,
Right?
Well,
of course.
yeah, people
Not
need
speaking,
to, I was gonna say, I'm sorry,
no, you're fine.
I was just gonna say, Yeah, we are pushing it forward, but, you know, we might end up pushing it to a next year project, but right now, it's a no-year project
Agreed.
in its current state.
Agreed.
It's not going
Fair point.
anywhere. So,
And maybe it's chapter 90 and we all say, you know, we'll take the 156 we have and we'll supplement it and we'll move it forward. And we're in a 6-week bidding process, and it's still this year.
Right.
So I think these are all things that we need more info to make a decision next Monday on
Right.
what one or many paths we might take.
Fair enough.
Because there's only a few paths that's going to move enough money quick enough that we could consider doing it
Agreed.
this year.
Right.
There's a few very limited paths that rely on both towns to be able to come up with 125,000
Right.
very soon to be able to go out to bid and have a project in the project window this season.
Right.
Brian, has there ever been a case where, take the bridge, for example, and let's say Erving could afford to front the entire cost of repair, that we then billed Wendell like on an annual basis for repayment?
You can structure an IMA between two municipalities for financial arrangements. I
And
don't
that is
have a case study that's coming to mind, but yeah, an intermunicipal agreement, you know,
thank
the
you.
select boards of each town can come together and form an agreement under Chapter 48. So yes, could we structure an agreement between the two municipalities? Yes, I just don't know exactly what that framework looks like.
Okay.
And I don't know if they'd be open to it. They may, but it's something we could
It's
explore.
just a thought.
Yeah.
It's not probably under the same methods and all that. It's a little bit different, but I mean, we get paid for wastewater under an agreement for a
Yeah.
period of time at a rate, and then we've
Oh, I
made
didn't even think of
we've
that.
made
Okay.
adjustments to the penalty costs to let them reallocate them to do other things. They've been all intermunicipal agreement type things
Yeah.
to do. So I do think that's
Okay.
an interesting option too. We can help
If it
front it to
keeps-
move it forward and help them bridge over a little time if that's what they need.
And if it kept costs down for all involved,
Yeah, nothing gets cheaper.
right? So it's
Right.
just a thought.
At least not in the construction that I've ever seen.
Again, not being at the bid opening, I can't speak to all the details, but my understanding is both bidders are interested and sounds like they would be interested in bidding again. There may be other bidders who are also interested in the work.
Sure.
So I don't think we have to worry about the project not being viable in terms of interest from the construction community in it. I think it's the time of the bidding. You know, it's always preferable to bid typically for these jobs in the off season,
Yeah.
getting ready so they're scheduling all their work out. Maybe it would be advantageous to wait till later in the the fall, winter, get ready, do the bid because they're planning out the next season. You know,
Lots of questions.
a lot of questions, but let me work on getting answers, and we'll get them out to you all by we'll distribute out the information as we get it. I'll talk to Glenn and find out his internal Chapter 90 plans, and then you hopefully will have your working information for your June 2nd meeting. Okay.
Sounds good.
Should we assume that June 2nd is going to be a joint meeting?
Yes.
Sounding like it.
it is now.
Yep.
I'm checking.
With Chapter 90,
Yep.
was it last year or this year they stated was going to offer more money to the towns? Was it last year or this year?
Well, there's two parts to that. So there's the standard Chapter 90 formula that we've all been getting for quite some time. There is a law that was passed 2 years ago, I believe, called the Fair Share Amendment, and it's an additional surcharge on certain earners over millions of dollars. And that money comes back specifically for education and transportation. And so we've been getting additional apportionments on Chapter 90 allocated as fair share money. We've received 2 of those so far, and it's been very helpful. It's been allowing us to do, like we just did a project on North Street. We've been able to do a little bit more paving, whereas we used to wait 4 or 5 years just to do a job. There is currently a bill that's starting to make get some meeting attention, and that is looking at adding an additional formula. I think it's also funded partially by fair share funding, but it is going to look at road miles, which would help more of the Western Mass rural communities who have larger road miles but fewer residents, because the other formula looks more economic development, looks at residents, looks at other pieces rather than road miles. So that potentially, if passed, could also increase our Chapter 90 allotment.
Okay. So Article 1, TBD.
Yep.
Review on second. Article 2, we already covered.
Yep.
We'll have proposed language to look at and determine if that's our path for Monday, for the second. Article 3 is the asset management. So this is AMP, basically, that we did for wastewater, but it's for water. We got awarded the grant for it. This is the matching funds. I don't know what level of conversation capital or finance has had about this already, but any questions or
No
concerns about it at this point? That is proposed as coming from water enterprise, retained earnings. And then in the next one, we're talking about appropriating from water enterprise into the water enterprise stabilization, capital stabilization fund that we just established. Does those two combined leave enough money in there for operating funds? Because I know you've kind of called out the fact that we use retained earnings to operate while we're not collecting, because we're not collecting every day on, every month on
Right.
fees and things. So I don't know what the balance is offhand. So, is the 50,000 allocation and the 25 or 23 for that grant going to leave sufficient funds in there?
So,
You know?
taking what we had for our certified free cash as of February, removing what you just appropriated at annual town meeting, and what we proposed with the 23.5 leaves you with a balance of 101,812. And so I'm proposing that you move $50,000 and it would keep a $50,000 balance, $51,000 balance in the fund.
After everything, okay.
And that's about half of your annual operating budget,
That was going to be my other question. So it'll cover between the biannual billings, in theory.
in theory.
There's
Okay.
your cash flow.
That equation works for me.
Yeah.
For
It's the way I
enough
read-
free cash flow, right?
it's the way I
You
read it
finance
this
guy,
morning.
you. I
Thank
hear
you for
that.
clarifying.
I
Any-
anticipated that question, so I wanted to make sure it was ready for you.
Thank you.
Not your first rodeo.
No, I've been caught off guard before.
Not very often anymore. Any questions, comments, concerns on the 50?
I like it.
Wastewater stabilization, similar formula. It's about half
Right.
of both what we have in retained and our annual operating.
Right, your annual operating is just over $1 million, and you have, after we remove the ATM approved articles, you're at a balance of $967,386. So,
And it's in our tax base, except for our what our neighbor pays.
right.
What
So
is
we-
our neighbor billing?
Hmm?
What do we? How often are we paid?
That comes quarterly.
Okay.
Right.
And then we taxes are or biannually as well. So,
Right.
but not 6 months apart.
No. So I did think this also made sense for now to keep about $500,000 in there. Obviously, we can monitor throughout the year and see how the cash flow works, and if we need to make further adjustments. If we really aren't touching that balance, you all may move more money next year.
Questions?
Brand new, so let's
Works for me.
see how it goes.
Okay.
No judgment.
Can we also, between the accountant and treasurer, just have them actually kind of monitor and trend our cash flow this coming fiscal year
Yes.
in all of the accounts there? We'd want to be thinking about that.
And
Investments versus free cash flow versus,
now
funding
that we're done with
seats.
budget season, we should also probably revisit the budget and reporting module that we all worked in the budget season. Put the budget to the side and work on refining the reports that you want to see, so you can run your dashboard and your reports as often as you want, because it will look at cash and expenditures at whatever your intervals are. So we can expand who has access to that.
Yeah, taking that, allocating everything on July 1 and actually building out a model of expenses
Exactly.
and revenues and
Crazy.
closely managing the dollars.
Exactly.
Okay. Article 6, the amendment to the Historical Commission bylaw. A few adjustments from our last discussion on it, or nothing on that one.
Nothing major except for I was not clear enough in section 2. So
Well, I was
specifically-
talking about historical, you're talking about museum.
Oh, sorry. I scrolled too far.
So nothing on 6, right, Jim? You good?
No, solid.
7,
Yes. 7 was section 2.
some adjustments. We also talked a little bit about determining whether we wanted to not
Correct.
establish through a bylaw for at least a year or 3,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of establish it as a board committee to flesh all the details out and have it operate for a year or 2 and figure out exactly what works and doesn't, and then potentially propose it. I'm not landed either way. I mean, I thought some more about it. I'm thinking we could wait till next week and when
Yeah.
Scott's back, and then kind of come to that decision,
Okay.
whether we pull it or not. And then I guess in terms of the edits, are there questions or concerns? Because this will be a framework for what it is, even if it's just established by us.
Right.
I mean, I know that they've had trouble meeting quorums, so I'm sort of leaning towards the less is more right now. If there are people who are very concerned, they're certainly welcome to join public meetings, and if there's that much of an interest, we can certainly revisit and build it out if it's warranted.
I think I'm leaning towards 5 if we're going to put it to bylaw right away. If we're going to just establish it, we can always change it in a week or 2 or 3. So I kind of would lean towards 3 is fine to start if
Yep.
we're doing it as a board. So I think, at least personally, I'd recommend we go back to 5 for bylaw language if that's the route we take.
So for your next draft, while you're still trying to decide how you want to proceed, you'd rather read it as 5.
I'm saying if it's a bylaw 5, if we're going to establish it,
3.
then 3
Okay.
is how I lean.
The one thing that you all discussed, you wanted it, and I think that was mostly Selectman Bastarash who asked for this. You wanted additional explanation in the article information, so on page 5 of the draft warrant. I tried to capture what I believed he was trying to communicate. So the rationale for why this request is coming forward beyond the fact that they asked for it. There's a lot of conversation about wanting to be transparent with the voters about the reason for this request and the concern about quorums.
Again, it was his recommendation. I think when I read that, I think the one thing I'd maybe tweak is the historical commission's actively working on projects like as historical properties as well as, or is split between working on both, because it is just the historical commission.
Correct.
And maybe that they are kind of actively split, working between, kind of maybe just indicating like there's some that are focused on some and the other. I know that's what you're trying to get at, but
Right. Clarify that more.
yeah.
Okay.
It's like maybe the historical commission is actively split between, members working on this and members working on that.
Got it.
And
That
then
makes
this is the idea is that becomes separate.
Got it.
And we can still speak to that. I think that was one comment also, was speaking to it in the prior article if we don't put this article on.
Right.
To the voters to explain part of the change in the bylaw a little
Right.
further.
Okay.
Good?
Yep.
8. Oh. We don't have further info yet on this yet from the assessors?
No.
Okay.
I did ask them to reread the DOR guidance that
Okay.
we've all been relying on and try to square it, and I gave them the questions that came from your deliberation
Okay.
and asked them to respond to that.
Then we will look at it again next meeting, unless
Yes.
you have any other questions at this point, but it was about as clear as mud. If they're stacking, they're reversible every year or not, then yeah, there's a lot to those couple clauses.
Got nothing new to add or comment until we have the clarification.
Okay. And then the Article 10, adoption of designated parking space at Town Hall for veterans. And that's the draft language we asked for last week, or last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions or comments on the language?
That one's easy.
Okay.
So-
Anything else on the warrant?
Can
Go
I
ahead.
ask a question of curiosity
On which one?
on the
9.
Article 10
Okay,
for the parking spot?
Yes.
We need to have a special town meeting to approve a parking spot, a designated parking spot?
It's in
Or it
the-
needs to be voted on by the public?
It's in the general laws as
Mm-hmm.
an option for towns, and so the question, this has gone to council to double check.
Yeah.
Typically in section 40 in 22A where we're dealing with parking issues, they start with local adoption, and then usually the select board or whomever's empowered to make further rules can then create the parking enforcement processes. We currently don't have the parking portion in our bylaws. So I started with the anticipation that we do have to start at town meeting, but council may come back with a slightly different opinion, so.
Okay, that's interesting.
So if we adopt enough of the general law local adoption parking clauses, then we can just do things like this as a select board? Or we still need to adopt
Whatever the-
each general law?
I think it depends on the bylaw and the adoption that the town meeting provides. Parking is a whole
Oh,
process. There's appeals and fines and towing, and there's all of those things. So we haven't gone down that road yet, though I've asked for clarity on that. So this is just, as you can see, we're up to 22A and 3/4.
Yeah.
So there's many different sections in this section of law. So again, I started with the because the rest of 22A requires local adoption, assuming that 3/4 must also. But he may come back with a slightly different interpretation. I'll be sure to get that to you all. I'm also I'm not clear why only town hall. We own many facilities, and I don't know why you wouldn't want that at the library and at the senior center. But the law is specific about town hall.
that's the MGL language.
Yeah. What the sign
So-
must read
so
is
maybe-
very explicit.
Maybe,
It's got parentheses around what must be on the sign.
I'll be honest, I just thought it would be assumed that you could just call
Do
the
it.
highway superintendent and say, we'd like to have this get assigned, and
The
they go
issues
out.
around enforcing it. So I think
Okay.
that's the question. Can you demonstrate that it was adopted so it can be enforced?
so I
Okay,
was gonna ask that, and I think that was what she was leading at. Could we just adopt it? Could we just adopt having a sign that's in a veteran spot anywhere we wanted on a town property without adopting this MGL?
Yeah. But can you
Then
enforce it?
Can we fine or enforce against it?
interesting,
Because
okay.
the law allows you to tow and remove at the owner's expense. Can you do that if you've not adopted?
So we don't even need to adopt that, that just comes with this?
Yeah, it's part of the MGL.
So if
somebody
we
violates
adopt
this,
this,
but-
they automatically have that authority
Correct.
because we've designated the spot.
Correct.
Only at town hall.
So,
Only at town hall for some reason. I would love to make that broader because I think it should be all town facilities. But
Wow.
taking off my retirement hat and putting on my old hat.
yeah,
It doesn't say whether you're a retired veteran or not.
In the I know, but in the enforcement, I guess the answer is I can take this offline by myself and read the law and find out what the requirements are to establish enforcement, because I'm reading it. It has to be the registered owner with veteran plates. So we're gonna license, registration, and veteran ID card.
if you had to enforce it, that's the mechanism that may be employed. I don't know how often it would be that involved, but yes.
I'm sorry if my
No.
curiosity is
Yeah.
taking time. Everyone's looking at the clock. Shut up, Lloyd.
No, I was looking at you, and then I was like, oh, if they don't have a veteran plate, doesn't mean they're not a veteran. I'm just following your train of thought there.
Right.
But that's why it
Interesting.
specifically refers to section 2 of chapter 90, because that is the section that carries on to the very last page.
Oh, wait,
Um,
it is only a registered veteran plate.
Only.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You must.
Huh. So if you don't want to go through that process, it's not for you.
Right. Right.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. Parking is a whole section.
If I'm correct, I believe the veterans' plates help them with their tax abatements, though.
I believe that too.
No,
It's one that doesn't carry
I see
an
some
extra
towns
cost.
have Purple Heart. So you have to have a Purple Heart plate in order to park in a Purple Heart spot?
I don't know. I haven't seen specifically Purple Heart restricted spaces. I've only seen veteran. There's
It's the
certain
same
communities-
ballpark.
No, we've had certain communities. They were working with a veterans organization that was creating the Purple Heart Trail, and there are many towns that receive signs through that organization. I know we've reached out to them. I think for a while they had stopped offering them, but I heard recently a town was working with them again. So So I think that's another veterans recognition program that we can do. I know that the select board back in 2014, I think it was, adopted the proclamation and the other requirements to be part of that program. So, but I don't think it goes as far as restricted parking.
The prior and future member might remember that, but I don't.
I do believe his name was there. So
I don't remember that.
I got it in the office.
I can tell you that there are only 2 veteran plates in the state of Massachusetts, and that's the Purple Heart plate and the veteran plate. There's
Okay.
only 2.
The only 2? Okay. Interesting.
And I think both of these
Both the
meet
same
this,
thing.
and they both meet the statute.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I drive his car, I can park there.
Now,
Operated by, owned, operated, and plated.
And okay, he's
You're-
an owner.
But you're the operator, so it has to be operated by the veteran and display the plate.
Okay.
Anyhow, we dive into detail there.
Sorry.
But it's all good. It's all for good reason.
In answer to Pete's question, yes, there are such a thing as Purple Heart.
Yeah, I see them all, yeah, and they paint them,
Really?
they
Yeah.
paint the spots purple.
Yep, they paint them purple
Orange has
with the
got one.
Purple Heart, and they usually say wounded veteran on the bottom.
That's in 22B56.
Let me find out what
Oh,
partial law
7, 8.
section that is.
Because Orange has one in the parking space is painted purple.
But it's enforceable?
I'm assuming it is.
This is according
That's
to Google.
questionable.
That's
Yeah.
the question.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why I brought
Home
this one
Depot
forward
has
is
veteran.
I
places.
think they're
Yeah.
a great program, right? But this is the way to enforce it. And so
Right.
happy to look into that one too.
I just never knew there was so much behind, but this is fascinating that there's so much behind parking and what you
I
can and can't
personally
do
am
and-
good with a veteran spot that
Yeah.
covers both.
Yeah.
I don't know that we
Yeah.
have the space or capacity
If we-
to have
Restrict every
for
parking
you,
space.
but for you. One is good for me for the moment. To have any is good
Yeah.
for me for the moment.
Agreed.
Any other questions or comments on the STM draft? Anything else on the agenda for tonight that I didn't cover? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Did you entertain the
With
motion
that,
or
I
make
will,
the motion?
either or.
I will make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.